Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next short attention span webinar. In this one, Kelly Malazzi, we get crazy.
Oh, you gotta love, I was going to say, you gotta love it when that word's right in the title.
That's truth in advertising right there.
Yeah.
Crazy sales advice. Here's where this came from, Kelly. I was hearing myself having a conversation with my coaching clients. And the first one, for example, said, my boss told me to make, and I think it was, I know I just told you 25, I think it was more like 50. It was like 50 sales calls a day. and I wrote it down, and I remember thinking to myself, well, first of all, who gave you that advice? Because anybody that says make 50 calls a day has never made 50 calls a day.
Right.
You know, it's like people who tell me you're so lucky you get to travel. Well, those aren't people that travel. Those are people that dream about travel, and there's nothing fun about it. Well, making 50 sales calls a day, it sounds like great advice, but my crazy advice was this. I want you to make less sales calls. Kelly, you've probably heard yourself say the same thing to someone. Why do we tell people to make less calls?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is that old adage, less is more. When you focus more and you're really zeroing in on quality, you're doing research, you're really making sure that you're calling on the right kind of company and the right kind of person within that organization. That takes time and that takes effort. And so what we're saying is spend the time to do the work on the front end and make those calls count. You're going to get a lot more out of those because you've been so much more specific and so much more targeted and so much more rehearsed and ready. So it just makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, I think there's also, you said it perfectly, you know, in terms of making those quality calls and the researched calls. I think probably, you know, if I hire a new sales rep and they've never made calls before, I might give them a stack of files and say, here are some accounts that we haven't done business with for a while. Just call them. Sure, that's different. You know, that's getting somebody's feet under them. That's getting them comfortable on the phone. In that case, knock yourself out. Make your 25, make your 50 calls. We're talking about new business prospecting calls here. Make less higher qualities, less better calls. That's our first piece of crazy advice. Mm-hmm. The second one, I love this one. Go make mistakes. Kelly, you've heard me say this before. Why do we tell people to go make mistakes?
Well, another client of mine just referred to it as tuition. You know, every time something goes wrong, or you you find yourself in a situation where you feel like, oh, I messed that up. The follow-up to that is usually, but I learned something, and that can be invaluable. So even though you've maybe you made a mistake on a quote or you agreed to do something that you really shouldn't have done. I mean, I'll tell you, I can think back to in my career and say some of the most valuable lessons I ever learned were when I really, really messed something up. But then I said, and here's what I learned about it, and here's what I would do differently next time, and here's what I would tell anybody else just coming into the industry. So there's so much learning that goes on when you make a mistake, and that's why it's unbelievably valuable.
And my feeling is, you know what, if a new sales rep's out there making mistakes, they're trying, they're putting themselves out there. When someone comes to work for me, I'll say, look, go make mistakes. You know, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's part of it. I want them to feel safe in making those errors, that I'm not going to go right down their throat. But do me a favor, don't make the same mistakes twice, because that's going to make me crazy. But for a new sales rep, you know what? Call the wrong person and say the wrong thing. Get hung up on. What does that show? Effort, drive, and then yeah, you know, it's a matter of what did you learn. I ran across my daughter. I was out on my motorcycle and I ran across my daughter, and she waved me off the road, and she got out of her car / my car, and she said, Dad, I almost ran over a skateboarder. And she told me what happened. This kid came flying down the road. She was pulling out, and this kid went right. The skateboard went right underneath the wheels of the car, and the kid stopped. He jumped off of it, and after I assured her she was fine, I said, "What did you learn? What did you learn?" And it really stopped her. It stopped her from crying, for one thing. It stopped her, and she said, "You know what? I have to do other people's thinking for them when I'm behind the wheel." And I said, "Perfect. That's it. Take
wow, that's great.
Forward." Yeah, it was awesome. And that's the thing. Go make mistakes, find out what you learned. Okay? Admit that you're not the cheapest. You're talking to a customer. And let's say this is a first-time visit, Kelly, and you and I are talking. Now, what's the advantage of my saying to you, listen, I got to get this right out there. Okay, we are not the cheapest printer on the block. What did you hear when you are the buyer or customer?
Well, there's a lot going on here, and I'm glad this one's on here because, first of all, there's a real honesty and kind of genuineness to that I think would really appeal to people. And you know, people also don't want to admit that they're looking for the cheapest price, and they often aren't. You know, they're looking for resources, they're looking for partners. So that may be, again, something that makes them go, well, good, because I'm not out to buy cheap printing, you know, that kind of thing. But it also, you know, it's almost like a reverse qualification process too, because you're basically saying to them, hey, look, if you are a bargain basement shopper, we probably don't need to go too much further. So it serves a lot of purposes, and actually this has been coming up a lot lately, and it's serving people really well that I've been working with to, you know, just get it out in the open, right? Let's not waste anybody's time. Let's just say what it is and be honest about it.
You know, I think the big issue for me there is the honesty factor. I really do. That's of everything else that you talked about, it's the honesty factor. We talk about that motorcycle. You know, I was looking at Harleys and I was looking at Hondas and I was looking at Victories. And the Victory is a funny looking bike. It looks like it belongs to a superhero. And the sales rep said to me, you know what, you don't buy a Victory because of its looks. You buy a Victory because of its ride. And it was an acknowledgement. We're not the prettiest bike out there. And it really endeared me to this guy. And I ended up buying a Victory Vision, which will be the thing that I'm taking cross country this summer.
Nice.
And I'm jacked about it, but I was kind of on the edge, on the fence, and then I thought, yeah, you know what, it's right. It was an acknowledgement. This is not the most beautiful bike in the world. It's a funny looking bike. But I'll tell you what, he's dead on right, because it's the ride that pulls you in. So go ahead, be honest with the customers. Next up, tell your boss you're struggling. Now, this is something that you and I deal with on a consistent basis as sales coaches, Kelly. The boss says to the rep, how are things going? The rep says, awesome, going great. Yeah, no, it's not. So why say to the boss, why would you sit down in the boss's office and say, Kelly, I got to talk to you about something. I'm really struggling. What's the advantage there?
Well, again, what you're hoping is that this person who is, you know, supposedly there to help you and teach you and kind of shepherd you through has some tools to help you. And that's, you know, the hope that we have for all of you. But it's really just to raise your hand and say, I need help, and that's a very difficult thing for most people. But what I want to say about this is it's important to be specific about what you're struggling with. You know, just to say this is really hard is one thing, but to say I'm having a lot of trouble getting past gatekeepers, or I don't have trouble getting the meeting, but once I have the meeting, I don't seem to be getting any follow-up meetings, or I get quotes but not jobs. You know, be specific if you're going to take this step and ask for help. Be clear about what it is you need help with, and maybe even, you know, highlight what you do think is going well in this particular situation. Yeah.
They know that you're struggling, and they know that this job is hard. And this is not their first rodeo, and you're not the first sales rep who ever sat down and said, wow, this is really difficult. And so you're not going to be, this is not new news. Wow, really? It's easy for everybody else. How come it's difficult for you? So by coming forward and saying, I'm struggling, you know, again, it shows something in your character, and that's part of what they're looking for. So there's some crazy sales advice for you. We hope that you take it from us, your crazy short attention span webinar host and co-host. And thank you very much, Kelly. Great job.
Thanks, Bill.
And we'll get crazy on the next short attention span webinar soon. Thanks, everybody.